Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm super excited to have you all here today. We have an amazing topic with an even more amazing guest speaker, and it's going to be a really, really great webinar. If you've joined any of our past webinars, we know we get super passionate about the topics we talk about. We've had some great Q&A sessions, and I can't wait to get into all of the details of our topic today. With that being said, I love to warm everyone up and give folks just another minute to join by making sure that you're all able to use the question box. So if you could please type into the question box where you're calling in from today. I love to always see all the different types of attendees we have joining, where people are calling in from. So please feel free to type into that question box where you're calling in from today. That is the beauty of webinars. We're all in different corners of the world. For example, I am calling in today from Boston, Massachusetts. I love it here, so I'd love to see you. Do we have any other folks on the line from Boston? Any other folks? Oh, someone here is from New England. We have someone, Tanya here, it's calling in from her yoga studio in Rhode Island. Welcome. Scott from Orlando, Florida. James from Waltham, Mass, from right by you. I'm in Malden. Let's see, we have Jay in Louisville, Arizona. We got Palm Springs. Tiffany from Texas. Oh my gosh, these are flowing in. Keep this coming, you guys. This is always great to see all the different folks we have on here today. Gwen from Kentucky, welcome Gwen. Royce from Virginia, Tiffany from Las Vegas. We have some folks from Canada, welcome. We have some folks from different corners of the world as well. Nadine from Chicago, welcome Nadine. We have Lon from Pennsylvania. We have some other folks. Sam also works in Boston, welcome Sam. Shane from Missouri, welcome. Gary from Connecticut, Monica from California. This is amazing. It's always so inspiring to see how we can bring folks from all corners of the world together for these virtual webinars. So thank you all so much for joining. It's great to see where everyone is calling in from. So thank you for that. And I'm happy to see that everyone is able to use the question box today. With that being said, we're going to jump into a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. So some of the logistics for today, this webinar will be recorded. So you don't have to worry about taking notes or anything like that. You'll get the materials in your inbox later today. So it will be recorded, and you're also going to be easily able to find the recording on the WordStream and Local IQ YouTube channels. So definitely look them up there. We also have our past webinar recordings available on there as well. And like you just saw with that question box, that's how you'll be able to communicate with us today. So definitely be sure to type your questions throughout the webinar into that question box and save some questions to send over in the end for the Q&A segment at the end. As I mentioned before, if you joined any of our past webinars, we've had some great Q&A sessions that really go in depth. I always love doing those, so super excited for that. So be sure to stick around and submit your questions towards the end of the webinar. So for the folks on this webinar today, some of you might be familiar with Local IQ or already working with Local IQ. Some of you might be totally new and welcome, and some of you might be familiar with our sister brands, WordStream or Reach Local. So just to get everyone on the same page on who Local IQ is, we're an all-in-one digital marketing platform to help businesses find, convert, and keep customers. So we marry proprietary marketing technology and first-in-class service, as well as free tools at your fingertips to help businesses thrive and succeed. A common question that I get asked on these webinars all the time is where can you find out more about who we are, find out more information about the topics that we cover on this webinar. Definitely check us out on our websites, LocalIQ and WordStream.com, and be sure to follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. You'll get updates on future webinars as well as updates on blog posts and other articles that we go super in depth into these topics that we talk about in these webinars. So if you need more information, it's a great place to start. So it's wonderful to meet you all today. Just a quick introduction to who I am as your facilitator today. My name is Susie. I'm a content marketing specialist over at Local IQ. I formerly was a digital marketing consultant over at WordStream, where I was coaching businesses of all shapes and sizes through all things under the marketing sun, from PPC to SEO to social media and everything else in between. So I took that experience and applied it to the educational content that I write on Local IQ's blog and WordStream's blog today. And like I mentioned earlier, fun fact about me is I am based in Boston, and it's finally starting to cool down, which I'm super excited for because my favorite season, unlike most, is the winter, and I love to go snowboarding on the weekends in between work. So I'm really looking forward to next season. And with that, I'll hand it over to our guest speaker today to introduce himself, Gordon.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to present some material to you. My role, let me start out with that, just 30 seconds on that. I'm a research guy. I'm the guy who sits atop Mount Everest and looks down at all the troop movements, if there are troop movements down below Mount Everest. I don't know, mixing metaphors. And see what's happening with advertising. We run the largest survey of local advertisers in the country. I'm going to show you a little bit about what we've seen lately and certainly since the pandemic. We run a monthly panel. There's about 2,000 advertisers on that. I'm going to give you a QR code that you can scan if you would like to see if you can participate in that panel. We don't accept everybody on it. You have to be qualified. It has to be balanced. Great insights from our panel and our surveys. We track local advertising to the nth degree across the entire country. And you're going to see some insights in that over the next, I'd say about 30 minutes. So what I want to do is offer generally some insights and understanding on what we're doing in marketing and advertising. So before we begin, let me see if I can get the screen to move. We're going to talk about understanding inflation's way businesses can adapt and thrive. My insights. We're going to go into Q&A. And I wanted to start out with a couple of quotes if we can get to them. And I don't know where we are. So if we can get to the quotes, Susie, if you can pull that up. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to start out with some quotes from a couple of guys who've been dead for 100 years, but they said some amazing things. And my favorite quote about advertising is this from Mark Twain: "Many a small thing has been made big by the right type of advertising." And what I want to emphasize in that is what he said is by the right type of advertising. He didn't say by more advertising. It was by the right type. So what is important to understand here is if we go to the next slide or the next click, what we see is the right type of advertising underlined, and then the next click will show us a quote from a guy named John Wanamaker, who's a retailer 100 years ago. I'm sure many of you heard of this, and he said, underscoring the right type of advertising, "Half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. Trouble is, I don't know which half." You would think today, with all the measurement in digital media, this has changed. We asked advertisers a year ago if they agreed with this statement, and the majority of them still did. So what's important to note is that there are many more choices out there in terms of digital advertising in particular, but getting the mix right is what a lot of people have gotten wrong. So we're going to talk about that. So on the next slide, what you'll see is what I'm going to be covering in 30 minutes. I'm going to give you a perspective on crisis marketing. We are in a crisis, have been through a crisis. We might be going into another one, and a really specific thing happens in crisis marketing that I think you'll find fascinating, and I hope you can benefit from. I'm going to show you how the pandemic actually affected marketing. We're coming out of it now. There are 3 phases. And we're in the 3rd phase, and something really specific should be happening with your marketing at this point. I'm going to talk about this emerging inflation-driven opportunity. Whether inflation moderates or kicks back in, we don't know, but there is something very specific happens when inflation occurs. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to answer a question I know a lot of you have, and that is, what should you be spending? This is the biggest question outside of ROI. What's the ROI on my advertising? This is the biggest question. What should I be spending? I'm spending an incremental amount on last year, but should I be spending twice as much or half as much? So I'm going to answer that question for you. And then I want to revisit one really basic thing, which is the marketing funnel, which I'm sure you as marketers know about. Certainly if you're an ad agency, a large advertiser, you know what the marketing funnel is. If you're a smaller advertiser, maybe not. So I'll give you a refresher on that. We're going to revisit. So let's go to the Great Depression. So we're going to go back 100 years ago and talk about crisis marketing and what happened during the Great Depression. This is an article out of New Yorker about a famous story about Kellogg and Post. Post cereal was the biggest cereal company at the time. The Great Depression hit 1929, and Post did what most businesses do. This is a recurring theme you're going to hear about. It retrenched. It said, oh my God, nobody's spending any money. We better retrench and not spend any money. Kellogg, the new upstart at the time, Snap, Crackle, Pop, Rice Krispies, used the new medium of the day and jumped in and spent loads of money and stole market share from Post. Great, famous story about marketing. Fast forward to the recession of 2001 on the next slide. and 9/11. Remember that period when everybody was just kind of frozen? There was a recession in 2001, and all of a sudden we're fixated to the television, this horrible stuff that happened. Everybody retrenched. Sound familiar? It's a theme. Everybody retrenched and pulled back their advertising. GM went, oh, hell no, this is a great time to advertise. They jumped in and they were roundly criticized for it. They said, we're going to keep America rolling. Within 30 days, all other OEMs, automotive manufacturers, jumped in with similar campaigns. What GM did was said, hey, we're going to keep America rolling. We're going to get everybody in cars and trucks. We're going to delay interest payments and car payments until 2002. And they sold a huge amount of vehicles based on that brief silence that everybody else had. If you look at the Great Recession on the next slide to 2009 and 2010, some great campaigns were born during that period. That was a huge and horrible economic downturn. But at the time, the folks in Vegas said, hey, this is a great time. People usually look to entertainment in tough times. We're going to start this campaign. Very famous campaign, quoted almost every single day in the media. So what happens during crisis marketing? And this next slide is probably the most interesting one. If you can remember this, what you see is a blue line that is consumer spending. And this shows during the Great Recession and then during the downturn, the economic downturn. And you can see there really isn't much of a change in the trajectory of that blue line, despite this huge recession, just a little bump down. People keep buying stuff. I gotta tell you, they're buying toilet paper, they're buying cars, they're buying food, they're buying furniture. And what happens is most retailers ride the orange line, consumer sentiment, the consumer confidence index, and that goes down and down and down. So clicking to the next little graphic at the bottom, what you see is that consumer confidence as an impact of social distancing went down 25.1%. This is during the pandemic, while consumer spending actually increased. People keep buying stuff. So if you retrench and you go, oh my gosh, I better be careful with my messaging, what I'm telling you is no, get out there. And I'll illustrate that in this next slide, the pandemic's effect on marketing. So let me start with a graphic on the next slide that shows you what happened during the pandemic. We run a panel, I referred to it a couple of minutes ago, about 2,000 advertisers, and we asked, are the conditions every quarter, what are the economic conditions for sustaining a small business like? And as you can see, we saw this huge spike. This goes from September of 2016 until March of 2020. We saw this huge spike where 73% of respondents said, oh, the conditions are very poor. Very natural, that's what you would expect. So click and you see that particular area where people say, okay, things are really, really bad. So what happens is that half of advertisers, on this next slide, you see a pie chart that shows they did the predictable thing. 52% of advertisers, when they said, oh my God, the world's falling apart, I'm going to scale back or put my ad spending on hold. Remember the Great Recession? Remember the Great Depression? Remember the pandemic? Well, this is a pandemic, and this is what happens. And this creates a fantastic opportunity represented by this next graphic. What you had during the pandemic was a 60% growth in media usage from 2020 in the spring until probably about mid-year, late year 2021. Everybody was glued to the television to figure out what was happening. Do we need to get vaccines? How many people are getting sick? Think about that time when you rushed to media to try to understand or make sense of what was happening. And there was a 40% reduction in ad buying. We tracked it in all of our ad data. Ad spending went down 40%. Get it? Larger audience, less ad clutter. This is what Kellogg knew, and this is what GM knew, and this is what the folks in Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce knew. This is a great time to advertise. So there are three phases in this particular slide. One is the first phase when the problem is beginning to grow. Well, next is the second phase when we're amid it, and the next will be the third phase, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, which we are just entering right now. And something very specific happens during that third phase. So when you take a look at what's happening right now, we took a look at the small business barometer on this next slide. And remember, we saw that the spike went up to 73%. Well, when we click and go to see what happened in the ensuing quarters, what we see is there was a click. If you would click, it would go down, and then it starts to go back up. So here we go again. We're up to 34%, where people are going, oh my God, there's inflation and there's uncertainty and there's politics. So what do you think is going to happen when the mood of advertisers begins to start to go back to, oh my gosh, the conditions are very poor? Well, on this next slide, I will show you. What happens is, look at that. There it goes. They're beginning to tell us that they're spending less. Let's hope it's none of you on this call. So all of you have just learned the lesson. This is not a time to spend less money on advertising. This is a time to probably spend more, because you're taking advantage of a greater media attention that's out there, more people looking at the media to make sense of the world, and your competitors are beginning to scale back because they're uncertain. So if you're thinking about stopping your advertising, I'm going to quote another dead guy, Henry Ford. Stopping your advertising to save money is like stopping your watch to save time. Pretty clever. So let's talk about, in the next slide, the emerging inflation-driven opportunity. And let's go back to this crisis marketing bubble I showed you. Looks like a lemon. Phase 1, phase 2, and here we are in 2022, phase 3. This is a really interesting portion where we begin to see change in messaging. So let me walk through the change in messaging that has occurred in these 3 phases. What you see on the next slide is the first phase, which is represented by this message. We're here for you. It was a lighter blue message. Most of the messages, remember that, most of the advertising messages were, we're here for you, we're open. You know, we support the community. And then phase 2 occurred and people said, hey, we need to get better messages out. We deliver, we can deliver stuff to you. We're safe, we're clean. Look at what we're doing to keep our employees clean and keep people who come into our store, our establishment clean. That's phase 1 and phase 2. That's over. So here we are in the summer of 2022 in phase 3. And this is inevitably what will kick in at the end of some type of pandemic, or the end of some type of recession, the onset of inflation, which typically occurs. It's promotions. Everybody has jumped back in the market. Everybody's advertising. Everybody's saying, we've got this special. We have these hours of operation. We have a new product. We have this. And then to differentiate yourselves, what you've got to do is say, have we got a deal for you? 10, 12 years ago during the Great Recession, this is when Groupon was born. Remember Groupon and the group deals that they had? Huge, huge business opportunity, and we're just beginning to see this occur. So let me explain to you what these promotions are. Promotions always explode in recovery type marketing, and especially when inflation kicks in. So in the next slide, I'm going to explain to you what promotions are. Promotions are the slide, 2 slides down. We're going to go into promotions. They are designed to generate attention and consumer interaction beyond typical sales events. They're always time limited. So it's not like a promotion forever. It's this week only or within the next 30 days. And they're always very measurable, typically by coupons coming in the door or rebates claimed or prize contest entries and things like that. In fact, if you counted the dollar value of discounts and prizes and rebates and things like that, advertisers spend twice as much on these things as they do on advertising. They're very, very popular. So what are they? They are discounts, rebates, and buy one, get one off sales. Short-term promotions, usually inflation-driven. Get ready this fall, back to school, Halloween, Thanksgiving, holiday shopping. You're going to see a lot of them. Loyalty marketing is always big because a lot of you, I sure am realizing, wow, you know, there's a lot of competition for my customers. My competitors have these big offers out there, discounts, rebates, etc. I need to protect my current customer. Loyalty marketing typically ramps up after recessions. We didn't quite have a recession, but then again, maybe we did. We certainly did not have one during the pandemic, not technically. There were no 2 consecutive months of GDP decline. There were just recently 2 consecutive months, but people's perception is what's more important. And the perception is, man, things aren't good out there, particularly because of what's happening at the gas pumps. Loyalty marketing typically ramps up in these periods. There are also contest games and giveaways. These are very big, primarily designed to go customer database and enable email marketing. So collecting contact information or first-party data on your customers, kicking in. I know a lot of you are probably doing this already. What I'm telling you is going to be a lot more competition for it. It's time probably to double down, really ramp up on these things and make a bit more noise about what you have and your ability to do that. So I wanted to answer a question for you on the next slide, which is, what should you be spending? We know this is on your mind because advertisers tell us all this time. Every time we survey them, you know, one of the things we ask toward the end is, what are the biggest questions you have? I have no idea what I should be spending. There's just a whole lot of opportunity to spend money. And I'm going to show what that looks like in a moment. So if we click 2 slides up, I'm going to show you what % of revenue should go toward advertising. So the first percentage is 0.9% of total revenue. So multiply your total projected revenue this year times 0.9, and you'll get what a maintainer spends. This is the average according to IRS tax records. And by the way, it's driven by a lot of businesses that spend almost nothing on advertising, and there's a lot of them out there. So the average is between 0.85 and 0.92. If you spend that amount, you will tread water, you will not grow. And there are a number of mathematical reasons for that. But if you spend roughly 1% of your total expenses on advertising, you ain't going nowhere. You'll maintain possibly. 5.6% is the percentage we get from advertisers that participate in our survey. And those who participate in our survey are active advertisers. So they spend a little bit more than the rest, certainly 5 times more than the average. And these are the ones we call in the game. They are growing their business, and their goal is to acquire new customers and maintain existing ones. So that's a pretty solid benchmark, about 5.5% of total expenses. If you want to be a conqueror, and who doesn't, then you're going to spend 10% or more. So new businesses, and you've seen them before, competitors, they open up a storefront, another ad agency or something, and they typically spend a boatload of money. They're all over billboards, they're on television, they've got flyers, they've got direct mail pieces, they're doing targeted, retargeted advertising. 15 to 20% of total gross revenues. That's a lot of money for a lot of folks. Some will scale back and coast along at about 10%, which is still quite a bit of money. And those businesses typically, unless they have the mix, remember the Mark Twain quote? Many small businesses were made big by the right type of advertising. Well, unless they have that mix correct, they're going to not grow. So they need to have the right type of mix to be able to spend 10% and grow phenomenally. So I wanted to talk to you about a little more about what advertisers are actually spending and where they're spending it, and talk about the mix. This table is just a little complicated, so follow me here. In the far left column, what you see, and this is from our latest survey taken in April and May of this year, all those people who are spending on average 5%. So these are the really active advertisers. 14% of them in our survey were buying broadcast TV, 12% were buying cable TV, 43% were buying SEM. You get it. So none of them was buying every single one of these 18 different types of advertising. They're typically buying 4 or 5 of them. So across the top, what you see is 14% of businesses, or 86% of them, are not buying broadcast TV, but 14% buy it, spending an average of $111,000. Scan down that column there with $111,000 at the top. $111,000 is way more than the rest of them. So broadcast TV is really for the big spenders. Look down toward radio and out of home and direct mail, and you can see others are spending, tens of thousands of dollars all the way down the line. So this just gives you a little more, I guess, touchstone what you should be spending on advertising. I did want to spend a minute more on what these categories are, these percentages are on the far right. So if you click to the stars, what you'll see is SEM, radio, social media, and content marketing. They're the 4 categories that local advertisers coming out of the pandemic, and remember, the pandemic just kind of ended in January or February of this year, and this survey was taken in April and May. So coming out of the pandemic, it was really important for us to understand what people thought. Okay, now they're going to be spending a lot more. Where are they going to be putting that money? What is their perception what worked the best? And it's certainly search marketing. Number one was social media. 47% of those who buy it said they're going to be spending more there, and 37% said they're going to be spending content marketing. But if we click on this one, streaming video and OTT, what we see is 41% say they're going to increase that, and that relates to content marketing, and that relates to social media as well. It also, to some extent, relates to search marketing, because most of this video really is in YouTube, or at least framed in a YouTube frame somehow, which increases your search ranking because YouTube is owned by Google. So it really does point a lot to video. I could spend an entire presentation talking with you about video and the importance of video. We have loads of information on that, but I have just one more tidbit I wanted to share with you since video is so hot, and that's on this next slide. Where is all that video going and the OTT going? If you look at the top 3 places that advertisers like you are placing their video, and whenever we show this to ad agencies, they tend to get a little pissed because they go, "Why, we want to put it out on the television station, we want to put it in the OTT channels, etc." Actually, the advertiser prefers to put it on their own social media pages, on their own website, and their own YouTube channel. 76% who are using social or using OTT or streaming video marketing. And it could be you standing in front of your plumbing truck talking about what a great plumber you are and how you've been in business for 50 years and all the jobs that you've done, and you've got great rates and you got financing and things like that. It gets posted up on your social media pages, particularly YouTube and Facebook, and it gets posted on your website and, of course, on your YouTube channel. So I just wanted to illustrate that this is a real big disruptor. Advertisers found during the pandemic that they've certainly retrenched, put a lot more effort into their own social pages, their own website, shoring it up, trying to figure out how to advertise and where to advertise. And many of them discovered video as a channel that, wow, remember that 111,000 for broadcast TV? I don't need to spend that. I can have a TV commercial of myself for a fraction of that cost. So like I said, I can spend a whole lot of time talking about video. It's a very, very important piece of the future marketing mix. So let's talk about what's changed since the pandemic. On this next slide, I've outlined 4 things that we have seen changed, and that is advertisers have learned the value of their own media holdings. They've hired internal marketing staff to manage those things. They've preferred personal contact with ad sales reps over do-it-yourself buying. This is a really interesting phenomenon. And they turn to ad partners that offer holistic marketing advice. Let me talk about each one of those things. If we click on the first one, learning the value of their own media holdings, social media and website development exhibited the highest growth during the pandemic. These are things that the businesses themselves, you guys, could control. And so there was a lot of interest in social media and shoring up their own websites. So we saw that happen, and advertisers learning the value of how their own holdings could actually communicate with customers. Number 2, they hired internal marketing staff to manage those tasks. Nearly half, 45% of businesses that we surveyed 2,000 of them, said decisions are now being made by an internal marketing team, not by the owner. And many of you already have an internal marketing team or maybe just a person. But to put this in contrast, when we did the survey 5 years ago, 5% of businesses said they had an internal marketing person. Most of it was the old craggy owner saying, "Oh, I know what to buy and I'm just going to buy this." But suddenly all these opportunities like Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and search marketing and everything else came up, and they needed to hire people. So this is a really interesting phenomenon. More and more businesses, your competitors, have hired their own marketing people. Many of those folks are very young. I'll leave it at that. So personal contact with ad sales reps over DIY. We asked, how many ways do you buy advertising? Buy advertising. And it was by email, it was by personal contact with somebody, it was by a DIY platform, 43%. So they use a DIY platform to buy local advertising. When we said, okay, of all these things you mentioned, what do you prefer? 82% of them chose something that involved interaction with the person, and only 14% preferred a DIY platform. We think that's going to change. But what's happening is, if you go back to the previous one, what you see is nearly half say decisions are now being made by an internal marketing team. Remember, I facetiously alluded to the Gen Xers, Gen Zers, I mean, these younger people, they need help. And this is where this preferred contact comes in. These younger folks are saying, hey, I really do need to learn about newspapers and the power that they have. I really do need to learn about outdoor advertising, etc. So this personal contact is really important, and they're turning to ad partners offering holistic marketing advice. So in one more click, I'm going to show you a red line. And what that red line means is that the businesses that did not learn the lesson of the pandemic stuck with these two things. I'm going to put all my money in social media and website development, and I'm going to have my own internal marketing team. They're going to make their own decisions, and we're going to handle our own stuff. The smarter ones are going, hey, we really need to reach out to these people in the local markets. People like Local IQ. I'm going to give those guys a plug. They've hired me to come in and do this for you. They certainly care about you. Understanding from media and marketing and agency people how this all gets put together might be your competitive edge, because we find a lot of advertisers not doing that. And what those advertisers like you are looking for is not somebody who can just sell them something, but somebody who can offer a very high level of marketing expertise. So the last slide I want to end with is the marketing funnel. I told you I was going to talk about that. On the next slide, you see the famous marketing funnel. For those of you not familiar with it, at the very top of the funnel is someone thinking about buying your product, your service, whatever you have to sell. For a car, for instance, it might be 6 months out. I think now it's about 3 months out. And they're just thinking about, they see a commercial on television for that Ford F-150 driving over a bed of rocks, and they're going, yeah, that's me. I need to get a new truck. So branding, our mass appeal media kind of comes into play. Then they begin to lean forward a little bit more. They have interest, they have consideration, time kind of clicks by. They know they need to buy a new car, a new truck. They need plumbing, something's leaking, they need a new roof for the house. They begin evaluating products and companies. They make a decision, they purchase. And then they repeat the purchase if it's something they might buy every 3 months or every 4 years or whatever. And then there's loyalty, and then there's advocacy for the product that they buy. So the reason I wanted to show you the funnel and remind you about this funnel and the role that mass media and branding and media plays at the top, it's not someone ready to buy right now. You're getting in their mind. You're getting mind share. You're being out there day after day after day. In any given year, about 3% of the population is thinking about buying a new roof for their house, which means 97% is not. So you just want to be in the market right when they're ready to buy. Well, how do you know? So you need to be there day after day after day to create that level of awareness. The important thing I want to tell you is if you click here on this slide, I will draw a box around what advertisers did, many of them, in 2020 and 2021, when they ceased advertising. They put all of their efforts and their money here in social media and their own company website. It felt really good because it was something you could control, and it wasn't expensive, and it felt good to be a little conservative with your money, didn't it, right? Well, those who gambled remember the Great Recession, the Great Depression, 2001, 9/11, what businesses did. This is really time to look at the top of the funnel and to do some other types of marketing, because a lot of your competitors, I hope those who are not on this webinar, are likely to do it again and be concerned and say, wow, inflation has really kicked in, prices are going way up. We don't know how to advertise. What we should just sort of hold back right now. We just don't feel like the economy is going to really support things and people are going to be reticent. No, it's the exact opposite. People are still buying stuff. This is the greatest opportunity for you. So I wanted to thank you. If you have any questions, and I'll turn it back over to Susie. If you have time for questions, I'd be happy to field some.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Gordon. That was amazing. I'm going to talk through a few ways that we can apply what Gordon had discussed. And I know that was a ton of information to take in, but super valuable information nonetheless. So again, thank you. I want to make sure that everyone is, I like to keep everyone on their toes here. So thinking about all that Gordon had talked about, if you all could please just type into the question box, how has inflation impacted you as a consumer? I think a lot of the times we think about, how businesses have potentially been reacted to the inflation in the space today, but we also are consumers and we tend to forget that. We get into the mindset of we're always marketing our business. We're also consumers in our daily personal lives. So I'd love to hear, how that might have impacted some of the folks on here. Just a little warm up in between before we jump into my section and then the Q&A with Gordon. So let's see, we have a few folks saying that, they might be saving a little bit more. I know personally, I am definitely just not necessarily spending less, but more selective of where I do spend as a consumer. Vicky here, she said that there's not really any huge changes, still buying. Rebecca said spending less on things we don't need, focusing spending only on food and necessities, definitely. Rochelle, we have driving less, that's great. James, more proactively seeking out rewards and deals. And we as businesses can probably see that, right? Consumers are still buying, still purchasing, but it's more about those promotions that Gordon had discussed that can really drive our businesses to continue to be profitable during the inflation times. Beth says she's buying less expensive products, so definitely doing those deal shoppings. Keep this coming. It's great to see that everybody is thinking about what they might be doing as a consumer, because that can definitely impact how you might react as a business as well. So I always like to do a little thought-provoking question like that throughout the webinar just to keep you guys on your toes. With that, I want to jump into inflation and marketing. So we talked a lot about that with Gordon's section, but let's pull in some of local IQ data as well to just see how much inflation can impact marketing. Now, keep in mind with this example here, this is just one example with cost per click advertising with search engine marketing across Google and Microsoft. But we do see here by industry, the majority of industries have seen a raise in click inflation or a raise in cost per click. So this is from our latest 2022 search ad benchmarks. Definitely check that out. But as you can imagine, all other marketing channels, not just this one marketing channel I'm using as an example, has probably increased in cost. And our research has found that CPC has gone up across the board with some industries getting hit the hardest with click inflation being arts and entertainment, medical, food service, furniture, travel, and more. So inflation isn't just impacting the consumer, but it's impacting what marketing channels you choose and spend on as well. So we talked about the concepts of what trends some businesses are doing with inflation, how that can impact your channels, how it's impacting the consumer, and how businesses are reacting. Now, Gordon talked a lot about seizing opportunities that other businesses might not necessarily be aware of or acting on. So we brought some ideas to the table on how you can adapt your business to be more profitable during times of inflation. So first and foremost, you want to be scrutinizing your cost and profit margins. So you want to be taking the time, really taking the time to understand and evaluate your costs versus your profit margins. You also want to be getting creative. And what I mean by that is thinking of ways that you can potentially save or squeeze the most out of your marketing budget. So for example, you might be doing something, more self-service so that you can save on certain staffing costs. You might be using QR payments for restaurants. In this example here, I have Domino's giving you a discount if you pick up, your pizza so that they save on delivery costs. Or for another example, hotels only cleaning your room if you were to request it. So we have seen other businesses getting creative during times of inflation, and that's definitely something you want to be thinking about, is getting out of the box. Also, you want to see where else you can cut costs, potentially by embracing automation. So can technology help automate something that has been done by an employee or yourself? Can you simply stop doing something without much impact? Don't undervalue your own time. So you're spending a lot of time to make sure that your business is running smoothly. Time is, of course, money, so that is going to impact, your business's overall costs as well. You also want to try and continue your employer branding, which I definitely know it can be a challenge for many businesses, but you don't want to lose those happy employees, especially in the midst of labor shortages. So you can always incentivize performance with attractive benefits, rewards, and a great business culture. But also this is going to impact how consumers are going to choose you as they're being some more selective with what they're purchasing. Consumers care about businesses that care about their employees. They want to shop with businesses that are treating their employees well. So while it doesn't always come top of mind to businesses as they're tight on money or cash, it can definitely be helpful. And then you'll also want to, of course, eliminate any areas of waste. So try to be ruthless with spending. Think about, and this is something that I talk about a lot in our webinars, is those nice to have marketing channels or nice to have corners of your business versus need to have. So for example, you need to have a high performing website for your business, but potentially having social ads could be a nice to have, or it's going to look different for everyone, but that's just one example. Also try and compare costs with suppliers. That's another way to just kind of save, and then stock up on supplies now and be protected from future price increases. Buy in bulk where you can. So the second way that you can take those concepts that Gordon discussed and apply them to your business is go on the offensive when it comes to getting new customers. And Gordon talked about this a lot. So thinking ahead of your competition. While the competition might not necessarily be seizing the opportunity in these times of inflation, this is your opportunity to identify free and low-cost ways to marketing your business. So like in this example here, doing those promotions that Gordon talked about, social media marketing, contests and giveaways, in-person promotions, being present, having those events, knowing that you are there and making yourself known to your industry and to your potential consumers, partnering with others, local businesses that have the same goals in mind, and trying other free ways to get your business on the web, like local SEO and local listings. Now, another thing that you want to be doing a lot during this time is evaluating your cash and debt. Holding on to too much cash in an inflationary environment doesn't make sense, as cash is a depreciating asset, meaning your value will decline over time. But if you do have cash, something like a Series 1 savings bond could be a good, safe option for when you need to park extra funds. While you want to always be careful of the level of debt, an inflationary market can make it a good time to hold debt, as the principal value is also depreciating. One effective solution to inflation involves leaning on small business financing. There are many available funding options out there to help small businesses weather financial storms like inflationary periods. Solutions like a business line of credit or a merchant cash advance are options worth considering to help cash flow when cash flow is a challenge for your company. So, this step is obviously going to look different for every business and might not be the most ideal solution for all of the folks on this call today, but it is something that I want folks to be thinking about. Now, another thing that we're going to discuss a little bit is raising prices. So this is another way that you can kind of maintain profits during an inflationary environment. And obviously that's not ideal, right? But it could be helpful in combating inflation's impact on your business. In fact, 67% of small business owners say that they have raised prices in response to inflationary pressures. So you're not alone in doing this. A lot of businesses are doing it. It's just how you go about it that's going to impact your brand's overall impression on the consumers and how they're going to handle it. So avoid turning off consumers with a dramatic across-the-board price increase. Instead, try raising prices slowly in modest increments and be strategic about it. Look closely at your competitors and to assess the right actions to consider. And customers will likely understand and might be less agitated if they understand the drivers. We're all experiencing this together, right? So try crafting an effective price increase letter. This can be really important to help you position your increase and be transparent with your customers. So as long as you're, with this example here, as you see on the right, as long as you're, empathizing with your customers, being transparent and getting personal about it and sharing, what is actually happening so they know what to expect, you're most likely not going to lose a ton of your audience just because you raised a few of your prices. And lastly, you want to, of course, reward those existing customers. It's been widely known that it's way more cost effective to retain a customer than to acquire a new one. So you want to be trying those customer loyalty programs that you can promote on low-cost channels like social media. You can also try small discounts post-purchase. So after they purchase one item, incentivize them to continue to purchase more with a discount code for future. And try things like referral programs and reward those loyal customers that want to refer you to their friends and family by going ahead and doing those types of promotional customer loyalty offers. So definitely check that out. There's a few different ways to do so. With that, I do want to round up a couple more points. So just let me get that up here for you, and then we'll jump into Q&A with Gordon. So one last couple of points that you all know I talk about a lot in these webinars is you absolutely always want to have a backup plan. So if you are to take away anything from what Gordon and I said today, it's that the space is always changing. So you want to set your expectations according to the current marketing landscape. So always have a backup plan. If this, said channel or said promotion doesn't work out, what can I do to still promote my business? Or if I see exponential amazing results from this promotion, low cost promotion that I tried during inflationary times, what can I do to maximize it even more? So always be thinking about those what ifs and have that backup plan ready to go so you're never caught off guard during these times. You also want to be flexible, right? We can't be married to the same strategy that we were running in 2018, 2019, and so on, right? So you need to be ready that your strategy will change depending on your needs, depending on the current consumer space, and that's totally fine. You just need to be able to accept and be flexible to rework your strategy accordingly. And with that too, business's success is going to look different for each brand out there, even within the same industry. So as helpful as it is to evaluate what your competitors are doing, you also want, and what other small businesses might be doing, how your business is going to market during these times is going to look different. So don't think that, one channel is the end all be all, or there is a right or wrong answer when it comes to your marketing mix. There are definitely some popular channels like we discussed, but you want to be able to keep all of your options open pretty much. So with that, we're going to open up a quick poll for you all. So feel free to go ahead and hit yes into that poll if you feel like you need more specific advice unique to your business. I know we got a lot of questions by industry in here. So if any of you do have specific questions that relate to your industry, I definitely would recommend hitting yes on that poll here. With that too, we're going to keep that up for the remainder of the webinar, and this will be an audio portion where we switch into Q&A. So Gordon's still on here and he's ready to take all these questions that we have coming in. So definitely continue to send your questions in right now for this Q&A portion. I know we have a ton coming in right now, and this is super, super exciting. So with that, I'm going to pick out a few questions to kick things off the last 10 minutes or so that we have here. So we have a ton coming in. One question we did see for you, Gordon, was from Sonia. She wanted to know, with that average spending chart that you showed by channel, that was by year, correct? Not by month, right?
Yes, it's annual spending.
Okay, awesome. That's great to know. Thank you for confirming that. Always good to know that, and we saw that with those annual surveys that Borrell Associates had released. Now, there are a few questions coming in here. Keep these coming our way. Pam had asked, as a new business owner, I'm totally new to this entire, marketing in this volatile space. What is the best way to stay up to date with these types of trends that you had talked about, Gordon? Where would you say someone new could start to learn more?
I'm thinking, it's really interesting. I think, not to give local IQ a plug, I'm supposed to be a fair and impartial guy, but they're here and they're helping you out, and they have a strong interest in doing so. So there's definitely one source. I think you can find the local chapter of the American Marketing Association. They usually have monthly lunches, as dues to join something like that. I'm struggling because we do have resources at Borrell Associates. You can certainly go to our website. It's Borrell Associates, 2 R's and 2 L's.com, and sign up. I think if you scroll down for our research alert list, we have research every single week. We have a chart of the week. We have a panel that would love you to join, where you get those types of insights about local advertising. And we survey, we're all about local. So we're about local agencies and local advertisers themselves. I think the Interactive Advertising Bureau is also helpful, IAB. You can certainly subscribe to some of the publications. Most of them are free. Adweek and Advertising Age. There might be some fees for the deeper part of those publications. Most of those are focused around brands. larger advertisers, not the smaller local ones though, but there are some insights in there. So I hope at least some of that was helpful to you.
That's super helpful. I know that you guys have a ton of resources available, and that was a great description on where folks can get started. It's always handy when you have those resources, you know, at the ready or in easily accessible on that type of website. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Zach had asked, how would you approach someone if you felt like they needed to increase ad spend during inflation when the majority of companies want to decrease? I think you covered this a little bit in your slides of how you kind of want to do the opposite to get ahead of the market, but do you feel like you've noticed businesses are hesitant to do so, and how would you potentially combat that?
Yeah, I think, you know, some of the information I provided today really would help in the approach to say the first thing you have to accept is that advertising is an investment, which means you're forestalling a payoff. You're not going to have immediate payoff, and that's really hard for a lot of businesses to accept. Getting the mix right is also important. So you could go out of the gate and spend a whole lot of money on advertising, and then in 2 or 3 months, you know, it's just not working. And so your conclusion is that didn't work. Well, what didn't work is the mix of it. So you're just going to have to say, look, if you really want your business to grow, you're going to have to invest in getting the word out. People won't just come to you because you have a great product. You have to tell them about it. Go back and read Mark Twain's story. It was in a column in a newspaper that he was writing for, about the spider that wove a web in the door of a local store, a local merchant, because the merchant wasn't going to advertise in the newspaper anymore. So it's like, okay, you don't tell people about yourself. Guess what's going to happen? So it's a tough thing because it's kind of easy to say and it makes a lot of sense. But if you're there counting every dime in a small business and you don't quite have the money, and it might not make sense to borrow the money to spend on advertising, it's tough. So you just have to get somebody really who can take a risk.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you for that, Gordon. We have a ton more questions coming in, so I have a couple more on deck for you. And I appreciate you answering all of these. This is great. So what would you say, let's say this one is coming from Casey here. How do you effectively measure the success of your efforts during these times and know when or where to increase spend? Now, I know you kind of touched on this a little bit in your last answer, but how would you best advise to potentially start doing that?
Some of the best practice companies we see are using an approach that tests results every couple of days. So it's not like we're going to launch a 13-week campaign and then on the 14th week we're going to see how we did. You have the ability, particularly with targeted banner advertising and some addressable cable advertising and some things television are doing and other forms of advertising, to tweak that message on a very regular basis. It sounds laborious, but if you now have the ability to do that, in other words, 20 years ago, you could develop a campaign and put it in radio and you couldn't do anything for several weeks. Now you can change things. So, test a message, and it really is about the creative. I mean, that is just so important. You can't just spend money on an ad in the newspaper, say, that's got 50 different things in it, because nobody's going to read it. But if you put a full page ad in the paper and it says, come down to my hardware store and we're going to give you a $20 bill for free, guess what kind of response you're going to get? So think about your creative and how compelling it is. That's where you probably need to turn to an expert. Tweak the creative as regularly as would be practical and see what kind of response you're getting, whether it's something simple as a like on a Facebook page, which doesn't have much value to it, but it'll tell you something, or it's a call that comes in, or an email or a registration or something like that. So frequent tweaking of the message, which is now more possible, and being creative with it, is a great way to measure the effectiveness of your campaigns and measure the ROI.
Wonderful. That's an amazing answer. Thank you for that, Gordon. And thank you, Casey, for that great question. These are all super great questions, and I wish we had time to cover them all, but this was a really great start here. So with that, I do want to have Gordon share where you can also participate in the ways that he collects data. Gordon, could you quickly describe where folks should go to participate in that data collection that you had mentioned to us earlier? I believe it's a
Sure.
link. Yeah.
If you go to BorrellAssociates.com, BORRELL Associates.com, and scroll down on the page, you should see a link for a sign up for our research alert list. If you go ahead and sign up, I'll put a tag on that in the next 2 days. I'll have someone reach out and just be by email and say, hey, would you be interested in signing up for the panel? Now, you can't sign up for the panel. You can apply for it. We keep a balance of size and types of businesses and agencies on that panel. So we're actively right now looking for panelists. The cool thing about that panel is, and just give me 30 more seconds, is you get the results of it every month. And there's some really, really interesting things. It's only like 10 questions. And the report itself is about 3 or 4 pages, but there's great, great stuff in there. I'll give you 2 more resources. If you go to our website, and thank you for the plug, by the way, and you look under our podcast, I'm going to look over here on this screen. There's one in particular you're going to love. We have a podcast. If you look under Insights on our website, and you'll see Local Marketing Trends Podcast and Corey's Local Marketing Minute. They're every other week. Each one is every other week. The podcast is kind of cool. Corey's Local Marketing Minute is 4 minutes long, funny as hell, and he's talking about something really important, a research finding. This guy is brilliant. And it's just fun to watch, and it's a great 4-minute investment of your time. So those are some other resources for you that might be helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you for those additional resources, Gordon.
Sure.
If we have a couple more minutes here, you have time for one more question. This is a great one from Donna.
I'll do rapid fire, 15 seconds an answer if you want to do 4.
Sure. I mean, they're just flowing in, so this is great. So with this one last question, they wanted to know, how can you know what best advertising medium is best for their particular business? Like, how could they start selecting which marketing channels to start using? Now, I know you showed that chart where there were certain businesses that were spending more in certain areas, but of course, each business is unique. So how would you recommend evaluating all the different options out there for marketing?
It's somewhat intuitive. You're going to almost have to guess, but you should be asking whatever medium you're working with, newspaper, radio, TV, outdoor, etc., what their audience is, and see how much of a match it is for your customer and prospective customer. You can do the same, with Google or Facebook. You can actually pretty nicely target on Facebook and Google, but just remember, you want to look at your potential customers and where they live, and try to target both geographically and demographically for your best customers. You have the ability to do that. The CPMs are much higher on that, but it's much more efficient than a lot of mass targeting, unless you have the budget for that. So I'm sorry, that's not a great answer. You're just going to have to try at least intuitively and say, hey, I think radio will work because it hits a certain demographic, country music listeners, or people who listen to, adult contemporary or whatever. That's my audience because I sell Western country and Western boots. Is that a thing? Next question.
Yeah. No, that's great. I know we're right at time, and that was actually the last question, but it was just too good to pass up. I really wanted to hear your thoughts on it. So thank you so much, Gordon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Be sure to check out the recording on the Local IQ and WordStream YouTube channels. Check out our blogs for more information on the topics that we covered. Gordon, this was amazing. I seriously can't thank you enough, and I look forward to our next webinars next month. Everyone, feel free to check those out. We do these webinars monthly, so hope to have you back someday, Gordon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.